Have you ever played a JRPG that attempted to defy destiny? Shulk is the perfect embodiment of someone who attempts to defy destiny at every chance he got to create his own fate, a world with no need for gods. Throughout the incredible journey of Xenoblade Chronicles, moment after moment, my jaw would drop to the ground in amazement at each new reveal. Then I'd hear the OST that I'm speaking over right now playing, and the harmonizing would always take that emotion of the scene and the immersion to that next level. With the abilities of the Monado allowing Shulk to see the future, every arc of the game felt like Shulk marching into a situation where he'd have to find a way to defy destiny or accept fate. When I found myself having to step away from the game due to day-to-day life, I constantly thought about what was going to happen next in the story. This is easily the fastest I've ever beat a JRPG of this length, and as soon as the credits rolled, I began making plans to play Xenoblade Chronicles 2. If you haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles yet, I'd recommend you come back to watch this video later after you finish your journey, because now we're going to be moving into spoiler territory. And part of this magical experience is being able to go into it with no prior knowledge of anything and getting the entire experience firsthand. Now that you've had a chance to click off this video, let's get into my firsthand experience. Xenoblade Chronicles to me was a massive mindfuck that was constantly pushing me to reassess my moral boundaries of who was truly right or wrong. Every time I thought I had an understanding of where the story was going, I was thrown another curveball. Xenoblade Chronicles felt very reminiscent of Attack on Titans, where the world starts off feeling small and straightforward, only to expand into something far more complex and morally ambiguous. You find yourself sympathizing with Egil, the presented quote-unquote bad guy, and understanding where he's coming from. Initially, the way things were presented at the beginning of the story was that the species on the Bionis are morally right because they are the ones being slaughtered by the Mechons. However, much like Attack on Titans, as the layers are peeled back, we're given that perspective from the other side. We learn that centuries before the events of the main game, the roles were reversed. Everything was in peace and harmony between the people of Bionis and Mechonis, and it was the Bionis who started the attack, and it was the Machina who were the ones being slaughtered. And so now Egil's actions just make that much more sense, being driven by a desire for revenge, mirroring the journey that we are on right now with Shulk, making the lines even more blurred between what is right and what is wrong. This single storyline left me completely stunned with how it was executed, and yet the most jaw-dropping moments were still to come with the ending of the game. But before we get into the ending and diving into all of that, let's take a moment to discuss the world building. Visually, Xenoblade Chronicles for me was just an immediate love at first sight. Everyone always talked about Xenoblade Chronicles games being known for their beautiful large-scale environments. When I heard this, I just assumed that meant the game sucked and they didn't want to say it, or it was carried by nostalgia because it's such a random thing to highlight and focus on. But after playing it for myself, I understand that sentiment fully. I would find myself at times setting the auto walk on and panning the camera to take in the scenery around me for each new zone that I explored. Sometimes I'd find myself grinding when I didn't need to, just because I wanted to explore more of the environment naturally and see some of the monsters habitating it. In addition to that, the setting is something that I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. We have these two titans who were locked in a battle for eons, but just randomly froze over mid-battle, setting the stage for the world that we're going to explore. No matter where you're at in your journey, if you go to an edge or look up, you may think that you'll catch the designers of Xenoblade Chronicles slacking, but every time, you'll find that that backdrop is geographically exactly what it's supposed to be within the anatomy of the two different titans. The excitement to explore each large landscape, combined with these fun, happy, upbeat OSTs, made me feel adventurous and just happy to continue playing more Xenoblade Chronicles. When it came to combat, Things were very unique to what I normally expected going into a JRPG, but as a big MMORPG player, I felt at home. I wouldn't say the combat is a highlight of the game, but once I got my rotation down, similar to how you would in an MMORPG, combat did feel a bit repetitive, but it was serviceable because I was so excited to get to that next story beat or continue exploring. But like clockwork, I always wrapped up that exploring to make it to the next point in the story, where I was quickly brought back to reality that this is a story about destiny. Throughout Xenoblade Chronicles, Shulk evolves from trying to bear this burden of fate alone to learning to trust and rely on his companions. Given his ability to see the future, I initially just expected Shulk to succeed in every situation. However, watching him fail repeatedly made me deeply sympathize with him. The weight of having the power to change the future, yet being unable to prevent those life-altering events must have been overwhelming, leaving him feeling powerless and helpless. Early in the game, these failures taught me that Shulk's ability to change the future wasn't as guaranteed as I assumed it was. And then the realization that for much of our journey, we were subtly being manipulated by Zanza and Alvis in a story where we felt like we were changing fate in the future was just an amazing touch. It made me question how much control we truly had until those final moments when we finally broke free. The plot twists in Xenoblade Chronicles to me were both mind-blowing but meticulously crafted. The revelation that the Monado couldn't harm the face Mechons because they were actually converted Homs, and the fact that Shulk unknowingly released Zanza to make the Monado more powerful to defeat them was just brilliantly executed. Now Shulk was put in this position where he had the power to defeat these face Mechons, but did he really want to use it? Because now we knew that those Homs were someone's friend or family back home. Then we get to Egil's reasoning for converting those Homs into face Mechons to begin with. Everything slowly started to make much more sense. Preventing the ether of those Homs' death from returning to the Bionis, slowly making it weaker for the moment that Egil decided that he wanted to slay it using the Mechanis. So from the perspective as we're progressing through the game as Shulk, we think we are doing the right thing by freeing Zanza, by stopping Egil, but then everything flips once we get to the end of the game and we find out that Egil isn't the quote-unquote bad guy that we thought he was. The High Intia having the foresight in sealing Zanza and diluting their bloodline with Homs to prevent themselves from becoming Telethia and being used to serve Zanza's will. The list goes on and on with different events that just feel so well crafted and mind-blowing, and that's without even getting into the Fiora Maineth plot points, but I'm gonna stop here just to prevent me rambling all day because there's just so many different twists and turns. These intricate, well thought out plot points elevated the game to a whole new level, and I couldn't help but feel that Xenoblade Chronicles was cementing its place to me as one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. But finally, we make it to Shulk's decision to not kill Egil after completely defeating him and pinning him into submission, and this led to one of the most unexpected plot twists that I've ever seen. The ending is where a lot of JRPGs go off the rail, often resorting to these last-minute ass pulls just to add an extra twist that often feels forced. With Xenoblade Chronicles, everything was just seated so perfectly. Throughout the journey, I in my mind just dismissed Dixon's extensive knowledge, his connections with key figures, and the fact that he found Shulk with the Monado is just this is probably just a coincidence, someone had to do it, and it didn't make sense for it to be Dunban. And I feel like the thought from my mind throughout this long journey just went away at the fact that Dixon and Alvis had been planning something with that woman from the High Intia. I just forgot about it, honestly. And so when we finally see Shulk defy Zanza's will and Dixon jumps in to betray us and then release Zanza, who is entrapped inside of Shulk, I was just in disbelief, man. We had just made peace with Egil, and we thought we were heading for a happy ending, only for everything to be turned upside down. Suddenly, we're being defended by the Mechonis and Maynith? From Zanza and the Bionis, like what? Shulk was just a shell? Maynith had a Monado for a whole 2 minutes? Like, what is going on with this ending? This is getting ridiculous. It took me hours to process the shock before I could even continue playing, and I had to revisit some of the scenes from YouTube playthroughs just to make sure I fully understood what just happened. But it was at this point in the story that we started to see Shulk finally begin to walk his own path, no longer serving Zanza's will, as he seeks to discover his true Monado. When we finally made it to that Dixon fight, I was screaming at the TV when Shulk just randomly decided to let him die peacefully. Like, what are we talking about? For that backstabbing I just witnessed, Dixon needed to die the most gruesome and painful way possible. But hey, I guess that's part of Shulk's journey and moving from that revenge thinking. One thing that I can sure say is he's a bigger man than me. A few bosses later, I finally got to see Zanza's true form, double Monado and all. And it was just like an absolute peak moment to see him engulfed in that Bionis armor. Then came this like arrogant lore dump from Zanza, which just felt like a massive slap in the face, reminding each and every one of us just how insignificant we were in the grand scheme of his plan. He wasn't trapped by the High Entia Elders, he was just tired and wanted to chill. Referring to all of the Bionis races as just bacteria was just like another level of disrespect. But finally, after all the buildup, Shulk and the party were able to forge the true Monado, created not just by Shulk, but by the unyielding will of the entire party members to defy destiny and create their own world with no gods. That final moment where we see Zanza be humbled by Alvis, who just casually reminded him of his origins, was just that true mic drop that I was waiting for. I may have shed a few tears during those final moments, but man, it was just like a heartwarming experience to see this long journey come to an end with a cast of characters that I had grown so invested in, and getting to see that they all came to find their happy conclusion. After learning the true backstory of Zanza and Maynith's ascent from human to gods, I'm even more excited to dive into Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm going in completely blind with no spoilers, and I'm eager to see if it delivers just as incredible of an experience as the one that I just finished with this game. To my understanding, I don't believe that they are related in any way, shape, or form minus a few similarities, but I have full faith in Monolith to deliver an action-packed story that's going to keep me invested from the start. If you're interested in another JRPG video essay like this one, I'll have a video linked here where I explain how Persona became a life-changing franchise. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this one, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more, but I'll catch you in the next one.